Okay, we're going to keep the program moving now. Really excited about this panel. Timely topic, an important topic, the CTO Survival Guide. So we're going to be joined on stage here very shortly by some of the leading CTOs in the wealth management industries and learn all about the challenges that are impacting them in the industry today. So this will be a lively discussion with a great group. So please stay seated and be sure to ask questions at the end. It's hard to get a group like this together all at once. So John, take it away. Yeah.
Thanks. Keep going.
My name is
different
Nimesh.
places. Okay, quick, move.
Should we do it?
Yeah, do it, absolutely. It's like a fire drill. Okay.
No, I think I'm on the right side.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. We've got some really great topics that we're going to cover today. So why don't we start off with just, selecting technology. There's like 500 applications that are out there if you look at WealthStack and include even some of the stuff that's out in the periphery, like the banking stuff. How do you select technology today? How do you, number one, avoid shiny penny syndrome, right? That's a shiny penny, let's all run towards that. And then second, how do you put together a really solid technology selection process? So Joe, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think the shiny syndrome, I think anybody who's been sitting in this seat with responsibilities for technology kind of has developed a little bit of immunity. But that doesn't mean that people in your organization have. And so it's not uncommon for people to come to you earnestly and saying, oh, I saw this shiny thing and we really need it. And if we only had that shiny thing, our sales would double, or our clients would be so much happier, we'd keep up with our competition. So that can be a really easy distraction to fall into. I think, so an ounce of prevention. I spend time at the beginning of each year helping people understand what our roadmap is internally and what we're evaluating, what's up for grabs. And I do that on a 3-year cycle. So this is the stuff that we're handling, this is the stuff that we're evaluating, this is the stuff that we'd like to do someday. So a little bit of try and bring it to a prescriptive method. When the rubber hits the road and you're trying to look at and evaluate this technology, I do my very best, and I came from the vendor community. I've spent a lot of time in fintechs. I put the kibosh on demos as hard as I can. There's so little to be gained by a demo. You can do that yourself, and most good companies have that ability. Take the time, work with your professionals, pull together 2 to 4 case studies or use cases and give them to the vendors ahead of time and say, this is what I want you to concentrate on, our stuff. Show us how you're adaptable and appropriate for our stuff. So those are a couple things that I do to try and add some focus to that.
Leon, how about you?
Well, it's interesting and painful topic because we need to make those decisions pretty much on a daily basis, right? When business come up with the business case or use case, it's always, the first thing comes, what are we really trying to solve? What is the business problem that we're trying to solve? Any technology requires people and processes, right? So we need to keep that in mind. It comes down to the gathering analysis, making sure and understanding what is really important, right? You cannot have 20 items on the list and 20 items of the same importance. You need to prioritize them. You need to stick to your guiding principles. What are the things that you're absolutely not willing to compromise? And then when you take it from there, again, another traditional question is, with the number of application or solution available in the market, right? Do you build or do you buy? And it's not an easy solution or decision to make, right? And you need to evaluate your roadmap versus the solution you're trying to bring. And how you're going to support and maintain. It brings different aspects of that issue, but for the long term or for the long run, it's evaluating your vendors, just like Joe said, right? Ask questions. Demos are blinking and making coffee at 8 o'clock and everything you can expect, but does it really serve your needs or helps your business? Ask a lot of questions, concentrate on the use cases, when you're selecting the vendor, it's not just the vendor, you need to make sure you look at them as a partner for the long term, right? It's not something they're going to build, drop, send you monthly invoices and walk away, right? You need to have a vision and a long-term roadmap in terms of how you're going to integrate and survive with their solution. So again, at the end of the day, it's asking a lot of questions, pushing them to demonstrate what they can offer based on your use case. And again, significant component of that is integration and the data availability that needs to be looked into.
Nimesh, how about you at Carson?
Yeah, hello everyone. WealthStack, John, thanks for having me here. Thanks for my Carson crew, that's right here. I would say, even before we get to the selection, I would think about the left side or the top of this discussion is, who do we want to be as a firm and what's the strategy of the firm, right? Why do we want to build something? Why is that shiny syndrome in front of us? Where do we want to win? Where do we want to be market compatible? So I would start with that, and I would really encourage all of you to play a more bigger role in that process, influence that discussion as technologists. Our management, our board's asking for that, so I would start with that. Then I would really think about, do you have the operating model within the firm to actually go after a certain strategy, whether you want to build versus buy or you want to build a certain product? Do you have the operating model? Do you have the services? Do you have the training, the adoption? How are you really going to make sure that this is successful? So I would start that first, do your research, and when you get to the vendor selection, date for a while. Right? Go beyond just references or competitive research. Have them come into your environment and do a POC with you. Have them show you how it really works before you really get into a longer-term relationship.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, a lot of times, look, I've been in technology for a really long time. Unless someone's having a terrible day, I've never seen a bad demo, right? It always looks good. Nobody shows you the stuff that doesn't look good in their demo. Yeah. But I think one of the points that Joe, you made was kind of start out with some use cases. I think the thing that you really need to do is make sure that you've got use cases in front of them that make sense. And it all really starts, Nimesh, with what you said, which is, what's the strategy? What is this supposed to solve for the business? That drives the use cases, which then, Leon, as you pointed out, drives a better demo. But I think too many firms allow someone to come in and just do a dog and pony show, as opposed to telling them, this is what I need to see, this is my use case, this is what I'm trying to solve for. Show me that.
Yeah, I think the other thing that the use case and requirements definition process, and it brings a level of engagement with your team. I attend almost every one of our investment policy, investment committee meetings. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's driving thought process within my firm. It also demonstrates to that team that I'm committed to understanding what they're doing and how they're doing it and what they're struggling with. So I think it can't be this kind of symbolic, we're doing requirements and show up for this session and we'll buy you lunch or whatever. It really needs to be a committed, long-term, embedded exercise where you're sitting down and engaging with your fellow professionals and saying, what are you trying to achieve? What are your priorities? How are you doing it right now? How are your friends doing it? How are your peers doing it? Because I think you can get a lot of insight from that.
Nimesh, you made a really good point, start with the strategy. How do you start with that strategy at Carson?
Yeah, it's a lot of us thinking about where we want to win, where do we want to differentiate, and more than where we want to differentiate, where do we want to preserve our differentiation, right? Do we want to go into segmentation? And it doesn't have to be a segmentation strategy, but do we want to be there, right? So a lot of just making sure we have conviction around where we want to go win and what do we want to go after. Because one can argue we're all trying to do the same thing, we're all trying to go after the same thing, right? And that's where lies the opportunity for us to differentiate, and at Carson we do a lot of that thinking and spend a lot of time around the front part of that process as that strategy. And make sure, again, we have the conviction to invest the entire organization's energy from ops to services to technology to marketing behind that strategy, right? All of our activities have to support that strategy and not something else. So that's a very careful and very mindful exercise, thoughtful exercise that we go through.
Excellent. So Leon, you've got a very diverse group of advisors, right, with Park Avenue. How do you avoid, that special snowflake syndrome where the advisor says, I want to use this piece of software to be able to work with you?
Compromises. And again, to Nimesh's point, right? You cannot come up with a technical solution that serves the percentage of your audience, right? So that's where the compromises come up, right? So maybe there's an enhancement, maybe there are certain different angles of how you can, if it comes to data, slice and dice the data, but it's all needs to align, and that's why bringing them together and trying to extract that vision, and that problem, it's not just, I like that to be blue rather than green, right?
Yep.
It needs to be material, and as long as they can articulate what subjectively they're trying to accomplish, right? It's an open conversation that requires trade-offs, requires agreements, but it's a daily challenge that we're facing and we're working through.
Joe, you've got a slightly different approach with your firm on the special snowflake idea.
Well, yeah, I think one of the things that we did as we started to enter into a more acquisitive phase and continued our organic growth was we chose our first couple of acquisitions really, really carefully. And we put an incredible amount of effort into execution. And we came through 2 advisor acquisitions with 0 lost clients. 0. And a level of satisfaction that really was kind of surprising to everybody in a way. Now we did that obviously because everybody wants to do a great job, and we wanted that to go perfectly. We also did it to set a precedent, so when the next few advisors come along and they have those snowflake needs, we can say, well, the first 2 sets had snowflake needs, and we're able to compromise, we're able to adapt, but we're also able to be successful. So you don't necessarily, just because you've done it this way, maybe you did it that way because you had a set of constraints in your previous practice that don't exist with us. So I think some of that is opening up that conversation, saying why? If I counted the number of times I said that word every day, I'd be dizzy.
I think if I may add, I think it's also what Joe commented on brings an interesting point. So when you talk to different agencies, different set of advisors, right, or individual advisors, each conversation starts, well, we're pretty much doing what everybody else does, but we're different. Whether they are there or not, it requires a conversation to understand. And that's where that journey starts, right? Really to understand why they think they're different, and is it because of the lack of training? Is it because of the lack of understanding the tool they're using? And kind of guiding them, navigating through that process to really understand whether there's anything that needs to be done special to treat their business needs versus the larger population.
Yeah, and John, if I may add, a couple things. We are very used to living in the solution paradigm as technologists, as CTOs. Give us a problem, we'll go find the best solution. Yeah. I think we need to shift from that to more of helping influence the strategy of the organization. So that's very imperative that we play that role in an organization. And the second thing, Snowflake strategy is fine. Just know that that is the strategy, right? And it's and not try to be a snowflake strategy on the top from an acquisition standpoint, but have try to solve something else from a platform standpoint. That doesn't work, right? Either of the strategy is fine, but be true to that and go after everything from your platform to your services.
Yeah, I think that was something that came up yesterday in our discussions, is this notion of swimming upstream a little bit. And not just being the recipient of emerging needs and requirements and business direction and growth aspirations, but really being part of and shaping that conversation in meaningful ways. And that means, we talked about, is the T more capitalized and in a larger font in our titles as CTOs, or can we really rebalance a little bit and say, yeah, our primary responsibility is technology, but we're sitting in a C-level suite, and we're trying to be a part of a proactive or prescriptive approach to this, not a reactionary mode. don't sit and wait for it, I think was one of your points yesterday.
Yeah, I would agree. And like there are a lot of firms that don't have that CTO title, right? So whoever's leading technology needs to be able to have that conversation about what kind of new products are we going to have? How are we going to integrate them? What's the strategy? What direction are we going to go in? And I think what really keeps coming out is either way, it's not right or wrong. Whether you honor the special snowflake or you melt it and say you've got to come onto this platform, it's not a right or wrong answer there, but it's a directional decision. What are we going to decide to do, and then how are we going to support it? Because there's going to be decisions and money associated with either one of those sides of the decision.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting too. There's a lot of buzz. The hype train is in full gear on AI, right? But AI requires a ton of data to be able to do anything. So, because it really is just a data machine that takes a lot of data in and then tries to drive some decisions based on it. So, with all of this proliferation of technology, how do you handle integrating data today? I mean, we all know the challenges that we've got with trying to get clean data, integrated data, normalized data. How do you approach that? Nimesh, how do you approach it?
Yeah, I think for us it starts with, we've transitioned from being an integrator to a builder, which means we want to own certain things in our platform. And that those certain things are experiences and journeys that we want to provide to our clients and our advisors. And in order to do that, there is a build strategy that we've come up with, and the build strategy is going to be a combination of what we build versus what we work with our partners, and what the underlying fundamental of all of that is data, and because that's what drives those experiences that we want to differentiate with. And it really, it starts with that. Do you have the conviction? Do you have the strategy around that? And then do you have the people and investment to go after it over multiple years? This is not a project for 9 months and it's done and it's like, what's the ROI for it? It is not that. This is an ongoing investment that the firm has to be ready with. So at Carson, that is our number one focus and a number one differentiation, I would say. And I tell my team, if we can be good at one thing, that is making sure that we are the best stewards of our data and we know what we can do with it. If we don't have that, we can't really play ball or be market leading in AI or any other technologies that we want to achieve, or even achieve the experiences that we want to achieve, right? So that fundamental building block requires a lot of engineering and a lot of thought process around it. So first ask yourself that question, do you want to go down this journey? It is a long journey, it's an expensive journey, but it definitely pays out if that is your strategy and you can sell with it.
Yep. Leon, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Nimesh said, and I think over the past 2 days, there were a lot of conversation about data, and especially the concept of own your data, right? And that's the concept of fight I'm fighting in my organization right now, because we spread across and we depend on different sources, and we're having a hard time reconciling the data. We're struggling with the cleanliness of the data, and owning your data and building solution that can house that data and then take advantage, whether it's AI, whether it's data, whatever you want to do, it's your data. We're in a highly regulated industry, right? There are multiple audits and requests, right? So I completely agree. It's a commitment. It's a serious commitment. It's easier to say, I have 10 different vendors that supply me with the data, and technically it's my data, but it's housed with them, and I can go and make a request to do certain things. It doesn't work in reality, right? So you either need to understand whether you're willing to significantly improve that, and that's where the ownership of the data and commitment comes to play, or you can make it incrementally better or incrementally worse, but you're not solving the problem, you're just kicking the can down the road, and you will continuously live with that data quality problem and data integration problems until you make a decision one way or another.
Joe?
Well, I've lived in kind of both sides of this world in data management. I remember as the Cal privacy legislation came into being, the sinking feeling within the regional bank that I was working in. Oh my God, we've got to be able to respond thoroughly to a request for every bit of data we've ever collected about anybody who lives in the state of California. And this is the tip of the iceberg. It's just going to keep coming. So one of the things that we looked at was, okay, you know, what do we do to manage what data we keep on site in our lake? And what are we going to rely on connectivity to external lakes? Because we're technically and legally not responsible for what's in someone else's lake. So I think, and now I'm kind of looking at AI and what it's going to take to run some of the tools. I mean, people kind of talk about AI like it magically happens. There's a lot that goes into it to create that framework within your organization. And so now I'm looking at that and saying, okay, what is it I want to build myself? But it's made me take a much harder look at our partnerships and saying, what are they doing? Where's the roadmap for each one of these firms that I rely on? I'm not going to build a portfolio accounting solution. No way. I'm going to continue to buy or rent that on an ongoing basis. And that's going to continue to be delivered in a cloud environment. So I got to be smart, and I've got to look at their data security and go through due diligence on their SOC and all those good things. But I have to look really carefully at their roadmap. I got to look really carefully at their vision for playing nice in the sandbox with other players in the space, other technology firms and platform providers. So that's what I got to do, is take a look at that. And I still, at the end of the day, we talked about this yesterday too, we are singular. For an industry our size, and you think about the trillions and trillions of dollars that we are collectively responsible for, we have no industry-wide common data model. We have nothing. And we've successfully, players in the industry who shall remain nameless have successfully resisted this for decades. And here we are. You know, we've got this huge data stewardship responsibility. We're going to have additional responsibilities around AI and disciplined, thoughtful use of that data and privacy and everything else. And we have no industry-wide standard to help us with that.
Yeah. You know, I was going to say, it's really interesting you say that we have no industry-wide standard, right? So we're sitting here as a wealth management industry saying that we want to be able to capture data and we want to be able to build AI tools. When there are other entrants that are coming into this market and will be coming into this market, you know, think of pretty much everyone else that does hyper-personalization, Amazon, Apple, that they own all that data. They have a common data model across all of their businesses, and they're able to deliver hyper-personalized experiences because of that data and having that data standard. And you're right, we have nothing like that in our industry at this point. And it's going to be challenging.
Yeah, it is it's an underlying challenge, and it's going to take a consortium to come together to solve that, whether it's custodians, whether it's big RIAs, whether it's big vendors, products to come and solve for that. We continue to put reliance on third party, right? You just mentioned we first started with integration. Now we're talking about reliance of data on third party. Next, we're going to put reliance of AI on third party. And you're putting the reliance that A is going to talk to B and talk to C, and it's all magically going to happen. And the answer is no, right? We're here talking about the same thing 20 years later, just a different thing, right? Yeah. In order to solve that, it'll take, if you want to be that builder, it will take that investment, it will take that mindset shift.
Yeah, I think, I'd kind of look to in some ways, medical records as an example. The industry was ready technically for a long, long time. The framework was there. It actually took a combination of, I think, two factors. One was legislation. You've got to do this. That was part of portions of the ACA dealt directly with medical record keeping. But also the economics were there. Like when you look at Epic and some of the other providers in that space, they made a lot of money because they established standards and they gave away connectivity where it was necessary. And the insights that they gain as organizations are priceless. I mean, they get a ton of value from that. The flip side of it is for the end, let's take it back to the end investor. If you've been to the doctor you've enjoyed the benefits of that. Your specialists communicate with your internist or your general practitioner or whomever in electronic ways, in highly efficient, accurate ways. And so when and if you run into a situation in personal health where you need good diagnostic work, you need a team of doctors to work interdisciplinary format with you, it happens now, and it happens without fanfare. So that's kind of what's on the other side of it for investors is, as we start to behave more responsibly as an industry, then their care is going to be improved.
And it's interesting, right? We're still debating who owns data. If you ask a vendor out in the hall today, who owns the data, I think you're going to get a very different answer from the RIA, who owns the data, right? So I think there's a lot of work that needs to happen around this because, in the healthcare industry, it's very simple. The patient owns the data, right? And you have that ability to port that data anywhere you want and remove data from one vendor to the other. We don't have that interoperability of data today in wealth management. We're still debating who owns it. And how do we integrate it? And how do we normalize it? And like you said, Nimesh, it's the same conversation we've had for 20 years. We're just still having it today. Maybe AI will be the catalyst for that, right? Or cyber will be the catalyst for that. But it'll be interesting to see.
I think it forces some of those issues to the forefront.
Or it forces some of the issues to the forefront.
And
exactly.
it in and of itself is maybe this ends up being another metaverse thing where it's the dominant topic of conversation. It arcs down, and then there's this kind of realization of, hey, we can actually do something with this, and then it'll arc back up. But
yeah, and Joe, we talked about it. The pendulum swings, right? Every few years, the pendulum swings. We were all one platform. Then we went to all distributed platform, and hence we have 500 some vendors you track. And now we're like, they really don't integrate at the end of the day, so now we need to think about solution. Right. We need to think about our own engineering teams and building all that, right? And it's going to swing. That's how the trend works. So just understand where in the trend cycle you are and the capabilities you have and where you want to sort of play in that. That's super important, rather than trying to, be something that it's not possible in the current cycle.
And how much money you want to spend, right?
Because
you're either going to build it, buy it, or rent it. So there's a cost structure associated with each one of those.
Yeah.
The building it, that's the gift that keeps on giving, right? Because you're just maintaining it after you've built it.
Yeah.
So, sorry, we've got a couple of minutes left. Let's do hot takes really quick. So, Nimesh, hot take on AI and then cyber.
AI is here to stay. It has now become mainstream like any other technology. It goes through adoption curve. Now it's come to us because other vendors have packaged this and made it more accessible, right? So it is here to stay. I think we all need to figure out where best to incorporate that into our business, whether it's everything from lead gen to operational efficiency to advisor workflows, whatever it is. There are many, many, many use cases. It's here to stay. And cyber question, with AI, advancement in AI comes new vectors of attacks with cyber. It's gone from emails to text to now it's getting into voice. Same cohorts, different tactics, so you have to be even more diligent, have a cybersecurity strategy, invest more than less on cyber because it's only getting more sophisticated.
Leon.
Yep, so AI is a highly effective tool to leverage. But in my personal opinion, I do not believe it will ever replace the human factor of financial advising role. Again, since we're in a highly regulated industry, right, it needs to be a balance in terms of where and how it's used. Completely agree with Nimesh. It's not going anywhere. We're going to get more and more questions or expectations or demand. Right now, the most use cases we can get out of it, it's probably cross-selling opportunity, lead generation, customer experience, client customer journey, in terms of personalization. And I would also think that next best action, right, based on insights, right? So all of that kind of coming together. So that's the realistic use of the AI that a lot of firms can take advantage of. In terms of cybersecurity, again, also agree it's going to keep building and developing in terms of new cyber threats. I mean, a simple example would be, I wouldn't be surprised it's now or soon we will have AI that might compromise the facial recognition technology. That's going to bring all sorts of different problems. So we just need to learn and concentrate on the cybersecurity. But on the flip side, I believe that AI can also help security experts to analyze, to learn, I wouldn't say predict, but understand those cyber threats or trends in that area. And I think that that's the positive impact from the cybersecurity as well. But we're going to be subject to new kind of attacks and exposures that we need to learn and get ahead of.
Joe.
So, so I think on the AI front, our aspirations in this area are very humble. We want to roll this out in back office operational and kind of support roles. And the reason why we want to do that is we want to build a track record of success and trust within our organization. I think there's a tendency for people to look at technologies and look at them as oh, this is going to disintermediate me from my customer, from my client, from my relationships. You know, robo-advice is a classic example of a technology that got maligned. It had nothing to do with, you know, your advisors going away, we're replacing them with Tron. It had everything to do with, hey, how do we broaden our reach and take your great ideas, your execution, and make that reachable, achievable, accessible by a much larger audience at a different price point. So I think AI for us is something which we need to prove out in different ways. And then I think bringing it into the sales process and bringing it into the client service process is just nothing but greenfield. There's so much that can be gained in there without ever kind of wandering into the advisor space and trying to, you know, guide or second guess those decisions. And that'll give the technology time to mature, but it'll also give us a chance to train. I mean, large language models and Gen AI is all about training and exposure, and we got a whole lot of work to do. People don't realize that Microsoft Copilot is something a lot of people have read about. Everybody's excited about. Try and get into the Copilot early adopter program. It's impossible. It's by invitation only and at cost. But one of the first things that Microsoft did was roll out a semantic index tool that you have to run as the first step there, as a way to start building that network of connections and saying, sales report means, you know, Jim's team in finance generates a sales report in Excel the third Tuesday of every month or whatever it is, so that the natural language queries and interaction that your users have some context to them. And that varies in every organization. So some of that training and setup and semantic work needs to be done first.
So I'll leave you with a couple of quick thoughts on my hot take on AI. So AI's been around for a very long time. It's just becoming mainstream at this point. In 1994, there was a scientific study that was published on ANNs, which are another neural network. They're an artificial neural network. And an ANN was able to approximate the FTSE 100 with only 7 stocks, with a lower transaction cost, lower portfolio management costs, and lower monitoring costs in 1994. That study was published in 1994 in a scientific journal. So AI has been around for a very long time. It's going to hit this industry. It's just going to hit it really, really strongly. And I think one of the key things that I would say is, if you don't know anything about this, go out and get educated about it. You're going to need to have some story around it. You're going to need to sit with technologists to set some direction of where your firm's going to go. Every firm that I talk to is doing something with AI. Every firm that I talk to has no idea what they want to accomplish with AI. So I think you really need to think about where you want to go there. On the cyber side, I will have to admit, we do some cyber work at the Oasis Group. It's getting pretty sophisticated. The vishing, smishing, vishing is voice phishing. It's getting very sophisticated. So when you've got older clients, you've got to take some ability to educate them, and especially your staff. We just had a firm, believe it or not, last week, who got a phishing email and wired $45,000 out of a client's account merrily to another bad actor. And that happened because a CSA got an email that looked completely legitimate. They did not have multi-factor authentication put together. They merrily set up a wire transfer and transferred $45,000 out to a bad actor. The firm is eating that cost because the client is a very large client and they cannot ask them to give them the $45,000 that they made the mistake on. And by the way, the client actually approved that wire transfer too, by the way. So the CSA reached out to the client said, absolutely, and the firm wired it, and then they found out it got wired to a bad actor. So I really do believe you've got to educate your staff about these threats and how to really double check on these threats and really make sure that they're educated on how to trace this or at least how to look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah, and by the way, that's, I've heard pushback, as I've talked with friends and associates in the industry, like, oh, we don't want to make things more difficult or scary for our clients. I think if you have productive, proactive conversations with your advisors and them with their clients, it's part of the value-added service. Like, we're going to take care of you. We got your back. It's sort of like the same thing as reconciling custodial statements with whatever you're doing internally as part of your portfolio accounting and reporting responsibilities. It's like, we got your back here. We're doing something that takes a lot of work. We would rather not do it, but it takes a lot of work and it gives you something of value, which is peace of mind. So I think you can turn that cybersecurity fear and make it something that really is a differentiator in saying, we're going to work with you and you're not just a number to us, you're actually a client who we're going to find a meaningful way to engage with you on this, and we aren't going to blast emails anymore. That's kind of number one on our list. Let's make sure our email interactions with our clients are very meaningful, very unique, and don't fall into the category of easy to phish.
So we've got a great brain trust up here. I'm going to open it up to the audience to ask any questions. Come on, Wim, you've got to have a question. Oh, there we go. Anthony. Just yell. I don't think they have the mic. I don't know where they are with the mic. So the question was, what are the top 3 things you may want to ask of a vendor, questions, so that you can evaluate whether or not they're a good partner for you?
Yeah, for us, it starts with cyber. Make sure they have a platform that's secure. Second is, I want to make sure their strategy, they will fit into our strategy. So whether it's build or integration, they fit into it. So if I'm a build strategy guy, then I want to make sure that I can use that vendor to build what the platform I'm trying to build. And the third, I really like to get into their roadmap. I want to know their team. I want to know what their roadmap is, where they're headed, because I want to make sure that aligns with what we would want in the future. What their investor backing is, what stage of maturity they are. I'd like to know all of that.
Leon.
I really have nothing to add to what Dinesh said. It's everything that he said, right? It's security, it's long-term partnership rather than one-time quick solution and go apart. And I cannot agree more than the fact that their roadmap of delivering feature and functions to their platform needs to be aligned to your strategic roadmap. Otherwise, at some point of time, it's time and effort and money wasted because something will gotta give, and you're gonna find yourself in that situation.
I think the only thing that I'd add to that that I think is critically important is, how do you play with others? Tell me about your interactions with your peers in the industry, with other platforms, with competitors, with providers. How do you facilitate that? Because no firm can do it all. And I don't intend to have a one-size-fits-all platform. So it's of critical importance to me how well my vendors play with others, how well respected they are, how they conduct themselves, how they build out their roadmap to support that. So all those factors have to fit together, and it's got to be a management team with integrity.
I'll add 2 quick things to that. The first is, I would ask them how many other large clients are they working with, right? Because a lot of the firms in our space tend to be smaller firms. So if they're working with another really large client, how much of the time are you going to get from their implementation team, their development team, things like that? The second thing I would say to them is throw a couple of enhancements at them and see if they say yes to everything. If they say yes to everything, they're probably not going to be a good partner.
Run
Because
away.
if they're saying yes to everything for you, they're saying yes to everything for somebody else. And you're going to look at a development team that becomes captive for whoever's going to be paying them at that time, and that will become problematic for you. Feature function-wise, you'll get from, they've got releases like every 3 weeks to, hey, I haven't seen a release in like 3 months, what's going on? And it's because they're delivering something for somebody else.
One thing I'd throw out that I want to ask kind of we don't have the fancy poll thing that Kitsy's had, but I wanted to throw out a question because this comes out of a conversation that we had after our session yesterday as we were just socializing. How many of you have kids that have or will be getting married? Just kind of looking out there.
We've got 5 or 6.
Yeah, okay. So would you be willing to plan that wedding on a phone?
You should have given me a heads up.
So, that's kind of the world that we're living in. One of our attendees yesterday in the think tank is literally dealing with his beloved child and their intended, who are planning a wedding on cell phones. And that's kind of the world that we're living in. So you may not like that, or you may not understand it, or you may not think it has meaning, but it guides a ton of interaction, a ton of innovation, and a ton of direction that's going to happen moving forward in the future.
It's really interesting you say that. So there's a study that's been published where, and it's by Accenture, 87% of investors between the age of 35 and 44 believe that AI is going to be absolutely revolutionary transformation in human interaction. 86% of them believe that they would prefer to work with a financial advisor who has an AI strategy or uses AI to provide a better set of advice for them. So this is the next generation that's going to be inheriting the great wealth transfer. They're planning a wedding on their phone. They are bought into AI. They're very, very aware of cybersecurity, or they're at least aware enough to punish you severely if you have a breach. So if these things are not on top of mind for you, to get an AI strategy, figure out your cyber, or at least get your team to be more educated on it, you should be concerned, because all of the people that you're currently working with, they're all going to transfer their money to those people. And those people are looking at the world very, very differently from your existing client base.
All right.
There's a question there.
Question,
One
yes.
hand.
So the question is, a lot of states have been rolling out individual cybersecurity laws around privacy, right? Yeah, a consumer privacy. And if you take a look at Europe with their GDPR, you probably have a pretty good idea of where we're eventually going to get to. We're just a little bit slower getting there in the United States. So we've got, Massachusetts and California that are putting together their own laws around consumer privacy, information, and consumer protection. This is what I will say back. One of the first things we do when we go into a firm is we ask them, what's your retention period on your documents, and how long do you have documents out there? You will be shocked at how many people have documents that are out there for clients that are either passed away or left the firm, or they're holding on to PII that's more than like 8 or 10 years old, right? So the first thing that we recommend for firms is take a look at the amount of data you're holding, and if you don't need it, you shouldn't have it. Get rid of it. Because if you've got it, you're liable for it. Okay, and if a breach were to happen, we've had companies that have had breaches that we've worked with the Oasis Group. When they have a breach, keep in mind, you have to notify every state regulator and the feds about that breach. And in some cases, you're required to notify the state regulator before you talk to the client. We actually had an instance where there was a breach, the advisor, to try to do the right thing, called up a bunch of clients, and we were like, hey, congratulations, you've just broken the law, because you're not allowed to talk to the client until you've notified the regulator. So I do think that firms need to be able to not only understand what those privacy laws look like, but they really need to take a look at what are they holding on to, and should they even have that data? That's the first start, because understanding those privacy laws, if you don't have a really strong compliance function internally, you're, as we were saying earlier, go rent it. Go rent an outsourced compliance consultant that basically knows the state regulations. That's my take on it.
I think we're asked to get out of the
we're being
stage,
asked to
John,
get
but
off.
we should take that offline.
We'll take it offline.
We'll take it offline, yeah.
This is yours.
That's what happens when you have a great
I got it.
conversation. Thank you, everyone.